You know how ghost stories usually go, right? It's always a dark room, maybe a flickering light, and there's always one person who sees something. But this isn't that kind of story. This one happened in broad daylight at 30,000 feet, and the witnesses, well, they were far from alone.
See, this is the story of a haunting that was so widespread, so public, that it actually forced a major airline to deal with something unbelievable. And it's a story that begins not with the whisper in the dark, but with the deafening silence right after a crash. Because to really understand the ghosts, you have to first understand the tragedy that created them. It all kicks off with a routine flight that turned out to be anything but.
So picture this. It's December 1972, a holiday flight packed with people heading from New York down to sunny Florida. The crew was top-notch, the plane was in great shape. I mean, on paper, this was as routine as it gets. But that's the thing about disaster stories, right? They'd always start on a day that feels just like any other.
And this is where the whole thing becomes just unbelievable. The problem didn't start with a big storm or some catastrophic engine failure. Nope, it started with a single burnt-out light bulb. As they were getting ready to land in Miami, the little light that confirms the landing gear is down, it just wouldn't turn on. So the whole crew, all these highly experienced pilots, they got completely fixated on this one tiny problem. So focused that nobody noticed a fatal mistake. Someone had accidentally bumped the controls and switched off the autopilot. So while they were all trying to figure out a light bulb, the plane was silently, slowly descending into the pitch-black night below.
The plane crashed into the vast darkness of the Florida Everglades. 92 people lost their lives that night. A staggering loss, and it all traced back to a single light bulb and just a moment of distraction. Now, for the survivors, the nightmare was over. But for the airline, and for some of the other planes in its fleet, a new and much, much stranger nightmare was just about to begin.
In the aftermath, the airline had a pretty practical problem on its hands. What do you do with the wreckage? And their solution was logical, it was cost-effective, and as it turns out, it's what seems to have unleashed the ghosts. So to save a bit of money, Eastern Airlines went in and salvaged any parts from the crash site that were still undamaged. We're talking galleys, ovens, electronic components, you name it. Anything that still worked was fixed up and installed into other planes in their fleet. And one aircraft in particular, a plane known as Flight 318, got more of these recycled parts than any other.
And you know what? Almost immediately, weird things started to happen. On the planes that had these salvaged parts, crew members and passengers started reporting the same strange feelings, a sudden, bizarre drop in temperature, that creepy feeling of being watched, or the unmistakable sense that someone was sitting in the empty seat right next to them. At first, it was just feelings, but then people started seeing things.
One of the very first documented cases involved a flight attendant. She saw a pilot in full uniform just sitting in a passenger seat, which was odd. She knew the whole crew was up in the cockpit. So she walked over, had a brief, totally normal conversation with him. She turned away for just a second, and when she looked back, poof, he was gone.
Totally confused, she asked the passenger sitting nearby where the pilot went, and the passenger just gave her this baffled look. Their answer was just chilling. They said, "Pilot? There was no one there. I saw you walk up to an empty seat and start talking to yourself. I just figured you were practicing something."
Okay, so these one-off incidents are creepy, for sure. But they're also easy enough for a big airline to just dismiss as rumors or maybe tired crew members' imaginations running wild. But then an event happened that there was just no way to ignore. An encounter that was witnessed by not one person, but by over 100 people, all at the same time.
It happened on Flight 318. Remember, that's the plane with the most parts from the crash. It was another packed holiday flight, and a flight attendant named Faye Merriweather was by herself in the galley. As she was getting meals ready, she just happened to glance at the shiny, polished door of one of the ovens, and she saw a man's reflection staring back at her, a man who was standing right behind her.
She whipped around. Of course, the galley was completely empty. Her heart pounding, she slowly turned back to the oven door. The reflection was still there, looking right at her. And then, it spoke.
Terrified, Faye ran and grabbed the flight engineer and dragged him to the galley. He took one look at the oven door, and he saw it too. But his reaction wasn't just fear, it was pure shock. He wasn't just seeing a ghost, he was seeing a coworker. He recognized the face instantly. It was Don Repo, the flight engineer who had died on Flight 401. And listen, this is the really crucial part. This wasn't some private vision that only one or two people saw. As word started to spread through the cabin, other crew members, even some curious passengers, came back to the galley to look. Not everyone saw the face clearly, but dozens of people reported seeing a faint reflection that just shouldn't have been there, or hearing a voice with no source. All told, more than 100 people became witnesses. I mean, this wasn't just a ghost story anymore. This was a full-on public event.
A mass ghost sighting is spooky enough, right? But what happened next is what took this story from just paranormal to a real-life emergency. The ghost's warning wasn't just some random cry from the beyond. It was a prediction that was about to come true.
So taking the ghost's warning seriously, the crew reported it. Mechanics went over that plane from top to bottom, but they couldn't find a single thing wrong with it. It was cleared for its next flight. And sure enough, mid-air, one of the engines failed. Now the standard procedure in that situation could actually risk starting a fire. But with Don Repo's warning literally echoing in their heads, this plane could catch fire. The pilots handled things differently. They nursed the plane all the way back to the airport, landing safely on just one engine. And they realized the ghost hadn't just appeared. It had just saved their lives.
After a ghost apparently prevented a real-life disaster, the rumors just became impossible to deny. So, in a move that is probably completely unprecedented in aviation history, the airline issued an official corporate order. Find every single salvage part from Flight 401 and remove them from the entire fleet. It was basically a corporate admission that their planes were, for lack of a better word, haunted.
But on Flight 318, which was like the epicenter of all the hauntings, the crew felt that just removing the parts wasn't going to be enough. They requested one final and pretty extraordinary measure. A priest was brought on board the plane to perform an exorcism, and from that day on, the ghost of Don Repo was never seen again.
So that's where the story should end, right? The parts were removed, the ghost was gone, case closed. But for anyone who flies, the story of Flight 401 leaves one deeply unsettling question hanging in the air.
I mean, think about it. The airline did its best, but an airplane is made of literally millions of components. Trying to track every single screw and wire from one specific crash across an entire fleet, that's a nearly impossible task. So the question is still out there. Did they really find every last piece? Or is a part of Flight 401's tragedy still flying today? And that's really where this true story kind of bleeds into modern legend. It's become this piece of folklore among pilots and flight attendants. They say that if you're on a flight and you suddenly feel an inexplicable chill, or just this strange sense of unease, it might just mean a piece of Flight 401 is on board with you.
It leaves you with a question that's just impossible to answer. The next time you're on a plane and you hear those cabin doors close, take a quick look at the empty seat next to you. You can never be entirely sure who or what might be flying with you.